the deal with all this drama? Like you supposed to be my mama, and you supposed to be my sister, and you supposed to be my brother, loving one another. I thought, but nowadays I'm caught deep in thought, cause saints don't act like they ought. Take me back, Lord, to the first, when family reunion was on Sunday at the church. The things seem strange instead of familiar, instead of edifying. Saints want to kill you, see you dying, and I'm crying out for those who knows how the Spirit of God flows with love, agape, and I pray that we will unite and form a holy posse and do this thing for the newborn King, giving hope to the meek through the joy He brings.
Good deal. Tell me why is it so hard to keep it real when we are bugging out? Jesus Christ something for the Bible tells us so. What's the deal? Tell me why is it so hard to keep it real? Let's put our faith to work and show this world the church.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here on this day that they call Labor Day. And we are going to be exploring rest on this Labor Day. There is a scripture reference that says that there is a rest for the people of God, or there's a rest for what God created, and that we should labor to enter into that rest. And so today, on this Labor Day in September of 2022, we are going to enter into the rest of God and cease from our own works. But thank you so much. I am going to be your guide this morning. I'm going to be your coach, your inspiration. Most importantly, I am your brother. I am you. I am a part of this one being, this one life that we all share. And so as we look at workbook lesson out of A Course in Miracles, 193 is where we are today. If you're following along with the book, we're on workbook lesson 193. And it's kind of a continuation of the theme that we looked at yesterday, and that is the theme of forgiveness, which is really the central theme throughout this entire course. Why is that? Why is forgiveness so important in our awakening, in our transformation, in the renewing of our mind? Why is forgiveness really this huge gift, this tremendous tool that is necessary for us to awaken to reality? The whole course even described forgiveness as the closest thing to heaven on earth. Forgiveness is not something that you will find in heaven. Heaven being this state of being in which perfection, this space, this state of being in which there is this perfect awareness, perfect consciousness of love only. It is the holy home of God. It is our right mind. It's called heaven. And so forgiveness is not something that is needed in heaven, because there is nothing in heaven to forgive. Heaven is a place of perfection that has never been impacted by any of the shenanigans of dreaming, of being separate from our Creator. That only happened in dreams. And so heaven is this place that has always been. It's God's home. It's our home. In fact, the Course said that we are the holy home of God when we're in our right mind, in our right, in the awareness of our reality as being the innocent creation of God. And so forgiveness is not needed there, but it's needed here in the dream of separation, because there is a thought or a belief or an idea that that the separation actually occurred, and that we're actually separate beings, and that we actually attack and offend one another, that we actually successfully, hold grievance against one another. There's this sense of fear and anger, and there's this sense of unhappiness here, and this dream of separation, and all the dark things that we not only observe, but we have experienced ourselves as though it's real, when the entire time what we are engaged in is not reality. And so forgiveness becomes the tool by which it points us back home. it becomes the tool by which we let go of this false identity. It is the way that we let go of the dream of separation, as well as the dreamer, the one that appears to be living in this world in a body. So it is the dream of forgiveness, of separation, and the one that dreams it, that needs release, that needs to be brought into an awakened state, that needs to just return back to what is unalterable and what is changeless, and that is their original divine eternal self. And it's forgiveness that helps us along the way. And so today we're going to spend some more time on that subject. Remember on yesterday when we turned back, if I can find it here. The way the Course defines forgiveness, or Jesus's brand of forgiveness, or God's brand of forgiveness, is different than the way we've been taught in the world. It says forgiveness recognizes that what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred, or what you think the world has done to you, it has not occurred. It does not pardon sins and make them real. It sees there is or there was no sin. This is what forgiveness does to our minds. It brings us from a place of sin consciousness, guilt, and fear. It says, and in that view, or in this view, are all our sins forgiven. They're given up. The whole idea of sin is given up. It says there is no sin except a false idea about you and me. When we hold a false idea about who we really are, that is what, that if you want to tag sin to an act, that's what it would be. And all of us that come here with the idea, or are conditioned to the idea, the false idea of a false self, of an individuated self, of a body identified self. And we at some point believe that this is who we are. That is what sin is, to believe that you're something that you're not. And even the belief in that doesn't make it real. It's a way to identify where our mindset is. It says forgiveness merely sees the falsity in a false identity. It sees the falsity in a world of separation, and therefore lets it go. Just that simple. When you're able to see the falsity that has created this whole world, that has been what the Course called an attack on reality, when you see that and let it go, when you see the falsity in it and let it go, when you see the falsity in the world and let it go, it said this is what forgiveness does. You no longer hold the perception of yourself, of others, or the world as you held it in the past. But you see through the eyes of Christ, you see what reality is. and you embrace that perception. So forgiveness is giving up one perception for another. What then is free to take the place is now the will of God. Once we give up our own will to make something different, we now can embrace the will of God, because that is what is there to take the place. And so that's just kind of a brief overview of what the Course calls its brand of forgiveness. It's the type of forgiveness that Jesus practiced when he was in his earthly body. He saw people, he saw himself, he saw the world as it was known back then, for what it was. It was not real. It was an illusion. It was a temporary experience. And so he was able to look past that and see the reality of all humanity. He was able to look past people's stories and see the truth of who they were. That's how he exercised the power of what we call healing. He listened to their stories, but he was standing there symbolizing the truth. The light that he was, it was the light that they are. And it was in that recognition that he released the power and gave people faith to believe in what was real. And that's why he would always say that your faith has made you whole. So that's kind of a brief overview of the theme of forgiveness, which again is central in all of these workbook lessons. And so today, the idea that is being shared and that we're going to spend time with is that all things, notice now, when it says all means all. That means that nothing is excluded. It says all things are lessons. All things are lessons. All things, everything, nothing excluded. Every relationship, every event, every activity, every encounter that you had in your life. It says all things are lessons God would have me learn. All things are lessons that God would have you learn. So what it's saying here is that in all things there is the one lesson that is to be learned. And as we get into this, we're going to find out that it's not multiple lessons, but it's the one lesson that will heal us all. It is the one lesson that will cause all of us to wake up. And it's called forgiveness. So let's see what it says. It says, God does not know of learning, because it's not anything that God doesn't know. So learning is a separation idea. In heaven, in God's reality, there is nothing to learn. God is infinite intelligence. God knows all things perfectly. So the concept of learning is not a concept that God knows. It's a concept that we have had to embrace. Because coming here in this world of separation, this world taught us how to think and how to believe in an idea that is contrary to perfection and that's contrary to truth. So learning is a concept or an idea that was born out of the separation experience. So it's not something that we do in heaven. We don't learn in heaven. We know. God only knows. And in reality, we only know. But we have forgotten what we've known. And so we come to this space, and so we feel like, there's something to learn. And then we get taught and conditioned by this world. It says, so God does not know of learning, yet his will extends to what he does not understand. So in other words, the will of God extends to us because we have lost our understanding of truth. God extends his truth to everything. It says, in that his will And so in that extension is the understanding that it is God's will for our happiness. God wills our happiness as his creation. God wills for us to be happy, number one, because God is happy. God is joyful. And so it is his will that which he create. He placed that happiness and that joy within his creation. And so it is God's will for our happiness, because we inherited it of him, and he willed that it be undisturbed. But our happiness, our joy, and our peace has been undisturbed when we accepted the tiny mad idea of separation and fell into a trance or into a dream, believing that we're separate from one another, separate from God. It disturbed our peace. It disturbed your happiness. It disturbed your joy. It disturbed your equilibrium, your ability to see clearly. It disturbed your mind. And so it says that God wills that it be undisturbed. God wills that your happiness be eternal and forever gaining scope, forever expanding. We are a part of an eternal God. We are part of that which is all in all, that is good only, that is love only. And God desires that we only experience that, and that we expand even the awareness of that in scope, eternally expanding in the joy, of full creation. That's what creation is. Creation is merely God extending itself. And we are that extension. Not separate from God, but the very oneness that God is, the very life, the very existence that God is. We are that and nothing less. And so, happiness, joy, it is the will of God for your happiness and your joy. It says, and eternally open and wholly limitless in him, that there is no limitation in us, that we are the life that God is, and that life continuously to expand and extend. It is boundless. It is endless. It is infinite. And that is what and who we are. But that some way got disturbed through this tiny mad idea that we successfully separated from our source, separated from our Father, that we all went prodigal and left our Father's home to search for something else. And there is nothing else. God is, and there is nothing else. Everything that is in reality is everything that's in God. Everything that's in reality is what was placed in you at creation. And so that is a good way to put it. That we all went prodigal. Collectively. He said, that is God's will. Again, your happiness that you inherited to be undisturbed, to be eternal and forever gaining scope, eternally expanding in joy and in full creation, your happiness. God is only concerned about your happiness. God has your best interest at heart, my best interest, everyone's best interest. And why would we, what would compel us to turn away from that? It says, and thus his will provides the means to guarantee that it is done. God, in his infinite creation, what he created, what he extended was himself. And it is himself that is the guarantee that it is done. God himself is the guarantee that what he created, who you really are, who we really are, he is the guarantee that that is what is done. So anything that appears outside of the will of God, it would have to appear in dreams. It would have to appear in hallucinations. It would have to appear in vain imaginings. It would have to appear in a mind that appeared to be split off from its source, and split off from every other thing. And thus we see the experience we're having here. And now we should understand what is happening here. Now we should understand why it says forgiveness is necessary to point us back to home. It is letting go of the illusion that there is something outside of God, to let go of the illusion that I am something other than what God created, to call ourselves this and to call ourselves that, to say we've done this and we've done that. That is the thing that needs to be corrected, our thinking. And so God sees no contradictions. We're the one that see contradiction. God sees none, because there's nothing to contradict. When you are all that there is, there's no contradiction. There are no opposites in God. There's only love. And so, yet we, as the creation of God, believe that we see them. We believe that we see contradictions. Thus, we have a need for one who can correct our erring sight and give us vision that will lead us back to where perception ceases. This whole world of duality is a world of perception that we created out of the belief in separation. We did it. And so we need to be corrected in what we did. It needs to be undone. And the undoing of it is the letting go of it and embracing the truth. And so it says we need one that can help us with our erring sight, or our sight of error, and give us the vision that will lead us back to where perception ceased, where there is no need for perception. There's no need for perception in heaven, just like there's no need for forgiveness in heaven. Why? Because there's nothing to interpret. Perception basically is how we interpret things, how we see things. But in heaven, everything is clear. In our reality, there's only clarity. There's only oneness. There's no contradiction. There's no opposites. And so God does not perceive at all. God doesn't perceive because there's nothing to perceive. It is absolutely clear. It's absolutely certain. Yet it is God who gives the means by which perception is made true and beautiful enough to let the light of heaven shine upon it. It is God who answers what we would contradict. God gives us an answer. When we say duality, God said no, oneness. When we say multiplicity, God said no, oneness. When we say fear, doubt, and sin and hate, God said no, love. He's the one that would respond with the truth. And so it says he is the one who answers us and keep his sinlessness forever safe. Keep our sinlessness forever safe. We are the sinless creation of God. There is no sin in us. We are just like our Father. There is no death in us. There is no lack in us. There is no scarcity in us. There is no sickness or disease in us. There's no violence. There's no attack. There's no threat in us. What we experience in that is but a dream. And when you wake up from the dream, you realize nothing has occurred. That's where the God kind of forgiveness come in. We don't hold our brother accountable for anything. Why? Because he hasn't done anything. For what we thought occurred, it didn't occur. We thought separation happened, but it didn't. We think we're separated from God, but in reality, we haven't. We think that we're a body, but in reality, we're not. We are timeless and formless beings. So this is the correction that undoes the illusions that we have built. It undoes the learning that we have taught ourselves. And so these are the lessons. It says these are the lessons that God would have us learn. These are the lessons that God would have us learn. His will reflects them all. The will of God are the lessons God would have us learn. It is the will of God. Our happiness is the lesson that God would have us learn. Our peace is the lesson that God would have us learn. Our joy is the lesson that God would have us learn. Our abundance, our infinitude, our eternalness is the lessons that God would have us learn. It says all of them, and they reflect his loving kindness. All of God's lessons reflect his loving kindness towards us, who he loves, who he created in love. It says each lesson has a central thought. Each lesson that God would have us learn has one central thought. Just one, not many. Each lesson that God would teach us, it has one central thought. And it says the same in all of them. It says the same in all of them. It has the same thought in every lesson that God would have us learn. Every lesson that God would have us learn here. In this awareness of a body, in this awareness of a world, in this awareness of time and space, God would have us learn one central thought, one central thing. It says the form alone is changed. There's many forms that the lessons come to us, but the central thing, the central idea that what God would have us learn is the same. The form may be different, the person may be different, the place, the thing may be different, the situation, the circumstance, the condition may be different, the activity or the event may be different, but the lesson is the same that God would teach us in everything. And so it says the form alone is changed with different circumstances, see, and events, with different characters, different people. It says, and different themes. It says, apparent but not real. All these things are apparent, but they're not real. But God uses them to teach us the lesson or teach us his will for our happiness. It says they are the same in fundamental content. The content of all things that appear to us, all relationships, all encounters, every minute of every day. The lesson, God is speaking to us in everything to teach us this one reality. It says they are the same in fundamental content. But this is the central thought that God would teach us, and that is forgive. Forgive. In every encounter, God says forgive. Forgiveness only takes place in dreams. It only takes place in a false perceptual world. Doesn't take place in heaven. God said your only way back home is through forgiveness. He says, so forgive everything. Everything. He says, forgive, and you will see this differently. So our vision, we will get clarity of vision. Through clarity of vision comes through our forgiveness. And not the forgiveness that we have been taught by the world, but the forgiveness that the Course teaches us here, where there's a total release of everything outside of us, that we don't use our perceptual faculties to determine what is true, but that we embrace the truth through forgiving, through releasing that which we have learned, to embrace the truth that is true always. So he says, forgive, and you will see this differently. everything, every encounter, every person, every activity, every event, every situation, every circumstance, anything that annoys you, just to the smallest. That annoyance is an indication that your perception, your vision is not accurate. We're still in error. We're still seeing through the eyes of separation. He said, certain it is that all distress, any distress that you experience, any distress, the smallest of distress the smallest amount of anxiety that you may experience, the smallest amount of annoyance that you may experience. It doesn't matter. There's no order of difficulty. There's no bigger or smaller annoyance. They're all the same. Remember, he said they all come in different packages. He said there are different characters. He says the form will change. Anxiety, fear, guilt, judgment, sick, disease, death, birth, everything that has to do with this world of perception. He says, certain it is that all distress does not appear to be but unforgiveness. Every anguish, every amount of anguish, fear, distress, anxiety that we experience, it comes from a place of unforgiveness. That means that we're holding on to what is not real and holding on to it as reality. And it has no life. It has no ability to maintain your happiness, your joy, or peace. It's not in things. It is inherent in the truth. It is inherent in your creation. And so he says, certain it is that all distress does not appear to be but unforgiveness. Notice now, this is deep, guys, in the sense that it ain't deep. It's simple. We have complicated life. We have complicated ourselves. We have created the stress that we have lived in. We have created the scenarios to keep us blind and in the dark. But the light is come. The light has come. It says, yet that is the content underneath the form. What is the content underneath every form? Unforgiveness. And that's where we're simply holding on to a false idea. It's happening in our minds. And we think it's happening out there, outside of us, but it's not. It is what's still happening in our minds. But we're not seeing with the mind of Christ. We're not thinking with the mind of Christ. We're seeing still through the veil of separation. We're still seeing through the veil of a false identity. We have not embraced who we really are as the Christ. That's the problem. And that is the solution. And so it says, it is this sameness that all annoyances, that all distress is unforgiveness. It is this sameness which makes learning sure. It makes learning simple because it's all the same. There's but the one lesson. The world would think you that there's many and multitude of lessons to learn, but there's only the one. It says, because the lesson is so simple that it cannot be rejected in the end. In what end? The end of your journey as being prodigal. Because God guarantees that all of us will eventually come to the end of ourselves and will embrace the truth. All of us. Jesus said it this way, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. And that's not some punishment or some demand that God is making on us. No, he said, ultimately, you're going to wake up from the dream. Ultimately, you wake up from sleeping. So he said, ultimately, we're all going to wake up and see the light of day. Ultimately, God guarantees it. Everyone. So you don't have to be worried about anyone going to any place called hell. You don't have to worry about anyone going to any place other than the place that they were created in, and that was in God. So this whole thought, this whole idea that people are ultimately going to, destroy what God made, and it's impossible. Don't hold it. Don't worry. That's why there's no need to worry about what we see. They're going to end up where you are, and you're going to end up where they are, where you always been, and that's in the heart of God. And wouldn't you want that for your brother? Because you want it for yourself. Why would you not want it for your brother? Why would you think that your brother or anyone would be capable of undoing what God did? We're not. We're not incapable of undoing it. We're not capable of saying that love is not real and that hate is what is real. We're not capable of changing oneness into separation, or into multiplicity. We can't do it. We can only dream of doing it. And so certain that it is unforgiveness that is creating the distress. It says, no one can hide forever from a truth that is so obvious that it appears in countless forms. He says, no one. He says, and yet is recognized as easy in all of them, if one but wants to see the simple lesson. And what is the simple lesson? Forgive. And you will see this differently. And the difference that you will see is all of us will begin to see from God's perspective, from God's point of view. We begin to see from the Christ vision. We'll begin to see from God's point of view. We will see as our Father sees. We will know and understand as our Father knows and as our Father understands. These are the words that the spirit of which God is and the spirit in which he created us. He said, these are the words that is spoken in all of our tribulations. We find ourselves in a place of tribulation, of great anguish. He says, these are the words that's spoken in our heart. Forgive, let it go, and you will see this differently. When we think that we're in situations and circumstances and conditions that are so unbearable in our relationships, in our dealings with the world, we think we get into situations that are so unbearable. God said, these are the words that are spoken. Because we get caught up in the movie. We caught up in the dream as though it's real. He said, these are the words that are spoken in all of our tribulations, in all of our pain, all of our suffering, regardless of the form that the suffering or the pain or the tribulation take. These are what the words that are spoken. These are the loving words that God speaks to us. He said, child, let it go. Forgive. And you'll see this differently. You'll see that it is nothing. He said, these are the words with which temptation ends and guilt ends. It is abandoned. It is revered or reversed no more, or revered no more. So these are the words that are spoken that causes us to see the light of day. He says, these are the words which end the dream of sin and rid the mind of fear. The fear that's in our minds, this sin consciousness that we so focus on, it is there because we have created this. We have made this. We have made these things. We have created the anguish and the tribulation that we experience through our false beliefs of who we are. It says, these are the words by which salvation comes to all the world. Let this dream go, and you will see things differently. Shall we not learn to say these words when we are tempted to believe that pain is real and death becomes our choice instead of life? Shall we not learn to say these words when we have understood their power to release all minds, not just our mind, but these words had the power to release all minds from bondage? These are the words which give us power over all events that seem to have been given power over us. We see them rightly when we hold these words in full awareness. Forgive, and you will see these things differently. It says, and do not forget these words and apply to everything that we see or to any brother or sister that we look upon amiss. So when we are aware that we are seeing that which is not reality, that which is not loving, that which is not God. See, that's what the scripture means when it says the pure in heart shall see God. Shall see everything as good. Everything is whole and complete. Because we're not looking through the filter of separation, but we're looking through the filter of reality, and where we use forgiveness to point us to the seeing. We use forgiveness to let go of all of the illusions. And so, how can we tell when we are seeing wrong? This is how you tell when we are seeing wrong. It says, or someone else is failing to perceive the lesson that he should learn. How will we tell this? It says, does pain seem real in your perception? That lets you know that you're seeing wrong. Anywhere there's pain and suffering, trial and tribulation, anguish, where we see that there is this, this great threat or this great, attack. It said we're seeing wrongly. When we see our brother that way, when we see them in their tribulation that way, he said we are seeing or perceiving incorrectly. Because there is no pain in Christ's vision. There's no suffering when you know who you are. There's no anguish. There's no tribulation. Things may be happening in what appear to be a worse way, a bad way. We see all the things happening in the world that are bad in the sense that they are not promoting life. But here it says, when we experience anguish and fear in our perception of those things, it's saying we're seeing wrongly. We're believing that the outside world is real. It's not real. It's a projection of our own minds. It says, do pain seem real in the perception? If it does, be sure the lesson is not learned. And there remains an unforgiveness hiding in the mind that sees the pain through eyes the mind direct. So God would not have us suffer thus. God would help us forgive ourselves. His creation, all of humanity, does not remember who he is. We forget who we are. And thus we stop looking through God's perspective, but we start looking through a perception of our own. It said, and God would have us not forget his love and all the gifts that love brings with it. Would we not renounce our own salvation? Would we renounce our own salvation that God has given us, our own way out? Will we remain in jail when God has let us out? Will we remain in fear when God has shown us only love? It says, would we do this? Would we renounce our own salvation? Would we fail to learn the simple lesson Heaven's teacher sets before us, and all pain may disappear and God may be remembered by his Son or his creation? When we remember God, it's here in the course. It says Jesus was one that remembered God. How? Because he forgave all humanity. That's how he remembered God. That's why if you look at his life and every encounter in his life, he forgave everyone. And they took stones to stone him. They said, only God can forgive. Jesus said, no. God in his creation, we have the power to forgive. We are God's creation. We have the power to forgive because we have equality with God. And they took stones to stone him. He said, only God could forgive. Jesus said, no. We can forgive too. He said, we must forgive. We can't see straight unless we forgive. We can't see things the way God does unless we forgive. Meaning, forgive, to give up the way we're seeing for God's way of seeing. That's what forgiveness is. It says, all things are lessons God would have us to learn. But it's the one thing. He would not leave any unforgiving thought without correction, nor one thorn or nail to hurt his sons, his daughters in any way. He would ensure his holy rest remained untroubled and serene, without a care. In his holy rest, he said he would ensure his holy rest remained untroubled and serene. Remember when we started this lesson? Say, well, this is Labor Day, but we're not gonna labor. We only labor we're gonna enter into is the labor to enter into God's rest. As we're listening to this lesson, we are sensing the rest of God. We're sensing that we're going to move away from our own works and enter into the works of God, which are finished, which is God's rest. It says, and he would have all tears be wiped away, with none remaining unshed, and none but waiting their appointed time to fall. For God had willed that laughter should replace each one, and that his son be free again. We will attempt today to overcome 1,000 seeming obstacles of peace in just one day. Let mercy come to you more quickly. Do not try to hold it off another day, and another minute, or another instant. Time was made for this learning. Use it today for what its purpose is. Morning and night, devote what time you can to serve its proper aim, and do not let the time be less than meets your deepest need. So today we're going to spend time with this idea. Forgive, and we will see things differently. It says, give all that we can today, and give a little more. For none we would arise in haste. It says, for now we would arise in haste and go into our Father's house. We have been gone too long. We've been in unforgiveness too long. It said, forgiveness puts us on the path to our Father's house. It said, and we will linger no more. As we practice this today, let us think about all things we saved to settle by ourselves and kept apart from healing. Let us give them all to him who knows the way to look upon them, so that they will disappear. It says, truth is his message. Truth, it says truth is his message. Truth is his teaching. His are the lessons that we are to learn, all of us. So each hour, spend a little time today and in the days to come, and practicing the lesson in forgiveness in the form established for the day, and try to give its application to the happenings for each hour brought, so that the next one is free of the one before. The chains of time are easily unloosened in this way through forgiveness. Let no one hour cast its shadow on the one that follows. And when that one goes, let everything that happened in that course go with it. Thus will you remain unbound in peace eternal in the world of time. And so what we're saying is, today and to days to come, we're going to practice each hour forgiving the previous one, forgiving everything, so that what? So that we learn that lesson, so that we can see things different every hour of all this day. Every time the clock clicks at the hour, let it be a reminder to forgive the previous hour. Don't hold any unforgiveness at all. We taught ourselves that. Now we got to practice and teach ourselves to not hold any, none at all, no exception. It is the thing that has you in anguish and distressed. It's not what's happening out there. It's what you're doing to yourself. It's what we do to ourselves. Because we were taught this. It says, this is the lesson God would have us to learn. There is a way to look on everything and let it be to us another step towards him, and into the salvation of the world. To all that speaks of terror, to all that speaks of terror, answer with this: I will forgive, and this will disappear. I will forgive, and I will see things differently. I will disappear and see things differently. So as you go through your day, regardless what happens, these are the words. These are the words that lead you out of distress and into rest. So to every apprehension, every care, in every form of suffering, repeat these self-same words. I will forgive, and this will disappear. I will forgive and see things differently. And then you hold the key that opens heaven's gate and brings the love of God, the Father, down to earth, at last to rise or to raise it up to heaven. God will take this final step himself. Do not deny the little steps he asks you take to him. And we take steps to God through our forgiveness, total forgiveness, unadulterated forgiveness. We let it all go. This is our lesson for today. This is what God would have us to learn. And it is one thing. It is forgiveness. And God takes the final step. It is that the will of God that it be on earth as it is in heaven. It is on earth as it is in heaven through our forgiveness of one another, of ourselves, of the dreams of separation. All things are lessons that God would have us learn. So everything in your experience today is the theme of forgiveness. Let's practice it. Let's become proficient at it. Your happiness will return. Your joy, your peace will return to you because you're not holding on to that which is not happiness or joy or peace. You let everything go. The whole world goes free. All humanity goes free. What a lesson in forgiveness. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And remember, forgive, and you will see as God sees. Selah. Bye-bye.